The doctor grabbed a combat nurse by the arm, called her career dead, and thought the whole hospital would stay silent. But he didn't know one thing. This nurse had survived battlefield medicine helicopter evacuations and men bleeding out under mortar fire. She knew the sound a body makes when time is running out. And in that snow-covered Colorado emergency room, she saw a patient dying while a powerful doctor called it anxiety. Maybe you've seen it too, someone in authority dismissing the truth because admitting it would cost them too much. Tonight, this story is not just about medicine. It's about courage, corruption, and the price of speaking up when everyone else looks away. Watch until the end because what Evelyn Harper uncovers will shake an entire hospital system. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. Long before the black SUVs rolled through the snow, long before Dr. Adrian Kessler put his hand on Evelyn Harper and learned the weight of her silence, Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center was just another small hospital trying to look alive before sunrise. The building sat above Redstone, Colorado, with its windows glowing against the dark mountains like a ship trapped in ice. Snow pressed against the curbs. Ambulance tracks cut through the parking lot in gray slush. Beyond the emergency entrance, the town was still asleep, tucked beneath pine trees and frozen rooftops, unaware that the night shift inside Cedar Ridge had already begun losing ground. A printer jammed at the nurse's station. A monitor beeped behind curtain 3. Somewhere near triage, a toddler coughed until he cried. Evelyn Harper moved through all of it without rushing. She had learned years ago that panic wasted oxygen. Panic made hands shake. Panic made people talk when they should listen. Her steps were quiet, measured almost too calm for the noise around her. She wore navy scrubs, a trauma shears clipped to her pocket, and running shoes with the soles worn smooth from years of hospital tile. At 46, Evelyn carried herself like someone who had slept lightly for most of her life. Her hair was pulled into a tight knot. There was a thin scar near her left collarbone, usually hidden by her scrub top. Her face was plain, in the way mountains were plain from a distance until the light hit them, and every old line showed its history. People at Cedar Ridge knew she had served in the Army. They knew she had been a combat medic. They knew she had worked somewhere overseas where helicopters came in hot and blood did not wait for permission. But they did not know much more than that. Evelyn preferred it that way. War stories turned into decorations when other people told them. They made strangers lean closer and say things like, "That must have been hard," as if hard were a cup of coffee that had gone cold. So she kept the past folded away. In her locker, behind a spare sweatshirt and a cracked bottle of hand lotion, there was one photograph. Evelyn, in desert camouflage, kneeling beside a medevac helicopter with dust blowing sideways across her face. 2 soldiers were lifting a stretcher behind her. Her eyes in that picture were fixed on something outside the frame. No one at Cedar Ridge had ever seen the photo. At 5:40 in the morning, Evelyn checked the supply cart in Trauma Bay 1 and found it missing 2 large-bore IV catheters. Again, she opened the cabinet below. Empty. She closed it gently. Across the nurse's station, Tessa Monroe was fighting with the printer, one hand on her hip, the other pulling a torn sheet from the tray. Tessa was 27 sharp fast, and still knew enough to believe every broken system could be fixed by caring harder. "Please tell me we have more cardiac leads," Tessa said without looking up. Evelyn opened another drawer. "Number." Tessa groaned. "I asked materials for them yesterday. They probably sent us pediatric urine cups instead." Tessa looked over. "You're joking." Evelyn held up a plastic bag from the bottom shelf. Tessa stared at it. Of course they did. At the far end of the station, charge nurse Brian Voss sat hunched over the staffing board with a pen between his teeth. Brian had been a nurse for 18 years and looked like every one of those years had taken something from him. He had tired eyes, a thinning beard, and the permanent caution of a man with 2 kids, a mortgage, and no appetite for heroics. He heard the conversation and sighed. "Do not start a supply complaint before 6 in the morning." Evelyn slid the bag of pediatric cups onto the counter. "We need cardiac leads in an emergency department." Brian did not look up. We need 6 more nurses and a functioning CT scanner, too. Put it in the book nobody reads. The book risk management likes to know exists. Tessa glanced at Evelyn. Evelyn said nothing for a moment. She took the binder from the shelf beneath the desk. It was labeled Equipment and Safety Variance Reports. The cover was bent. The pages inside were full of careful handwriting, printed forms, dates, signatures, and silence. She opened to a new page and began writing. Brian finally looked up. Evelyn. She kept writing. What? You know how this goes. Yes. Then why keep doing it? Evelyn capped the pen and looked at him. Because when the first patient gets hurt, the paper proves we saw the hole before they fell through it. Brian held her gaze for a second, then looked away. Tessa stopped fighting the printer. The monitor behind the curtain 3 beeped again. The ER kept breathing. Cedar Ridge had rules that were never printed anywhere. Move patients fast. Keep wait times down. Keep doctors happy. Do not embarrass a physician in front of a family. Do not write notes that make administration nervous. Do not use words like unsafe, unless you enjoy meetings with people who smile without blinking. Most people learn the rules by accident. A nurse questioned a discharge and lost weekend shifts. A tech reported a medication delay and got moved to nights. A resident asked why a stroke patient waited 2 hours for imaging and was reminded that his contract renewal depended on being a team player. Cedar Ridge did not punish loudly. It punished with schedules, with evaluations, with whispers, with the slow removal of trust. Evelyn had been there 6 years long enough to know the shape of the place. The hospital served ski tourists and winter ranch families and summer retired miners all year, and veterans who drove over from smaller towns because Cedar Ridge was the only emergency room within reach. The sign outside said Regional Medical Center. The locals just called it the Ridge. The Ridge saved lives when it had to. Evelyn had seen good people do brave work inside those walls. She had seen nurses stay 3 hours past shift because a family needed someone to explain a death certificate. She had seen respiratory therapists run until sweat darkened their collars. She had seen lab techs drive in during blizzards because blood cultures could not wait. That was what made the rot harder to name. Bad systems rarely looked evil from the inside. They looked busy. They looked overwhelmed. They looked like everyone doing their best while a few powerful people learned how much damage could be hidden inside the phrase a standard procedure. The automatic doors opened. Cold air moved through the ER. Dr. Adrian Kessler walked in at 6:03. He never looked cold. That was the first thing Evelyn had noticed about him years ago. Other people came in rubbing their hands, shaking snow from their coats, breathing hard from the parking lot climb. Kessler entered every room as if the weather had stepped aside for him. He was 58, tall, silver-haired, and polished in a way that seemed rehearsed. His white coat was pressed. His watch was expensive. His shoes never squeaked. He had the kind of voice that could sound reasonable while cutting someone open. He dropped his leather bag beside the physician desk and scanned the board. Why are there 9 waiting? Brian straightened. We had 2 ambulances back to back. 1 pediatric asthma, 1 fall on blood thinners. Overnight, only had 2 nurses. Kessler picked up a chart. Excuses don't clear beds. Tessa's face tightened. Evelyn watched her hands curl around a stack of labels. Kessler saw it. He smiled. Something to add Nurse Monroe. Tessa lowered her eyes. No doctor. Good. Then let's practice emergency medicine instead of community theater. He turned toward the waiting area. The words hung behind him like smoke. Brian pretended to study the board. Tessa pressed her lips together and went back to the printer. Evelyn opened the medication drawer and counted syringes she had already counted. Kessler was not the only doctor at Cedar Ridge who ruled by temperature. Dr. Calvin Roth used boredom like a weapon, dismissing concerns with a lifted eyebrow and a slow blink. Dr. Elaine Pierce was sharper colder, famous for making young nurses cry and then documenting them for emotional instability. But Kessler was the center of gravity. Administration protected him because his patient throughput numbers were excellent. He discharged fast. He admitted rarely. He kept costs low. His complications were someone else's problem. At 6:19, an older man stepped through triage with one hand pressed against his sternum and the other wrapped around his wife's fingers. His name was Walter Briggs. Evelyn noticed him before the triage nurse called his name. Some patients carried danger around them like a smell. Walter tried to smile at the receptionist. It was a polite smile, apologetic, the kind men of his generation used when they believed being sick was an inconvenience to everyone else. He wore a brown canvas jacket, jeans, and work boots salt-stained at the edges. His skin had a gray cast beneath the morning stubble. Sweat darkened the collar of his flannel shirt. His wife June looked terrified, not loud terrified. Worse, quiet terrified. She had one hand on his elbow and the other gripping a folded paper from their kitchen table, probably a list of medications written in careful block letters. Her eyes moved from face to face, searching for the person who would take her fears seriously. Evelyn crossed the triage area before anyone called her. "Sir, I'm Evelyn. Can you tell me what's going on?" Walter gave a breathless little laugh. "My wife thinks I'm being dramatic." June's head snapped toward him. "I do not." Evelyn took his wrist. His pulse jumped under her fingers, fast and uneven. She looked at June. "What happened?" June swallowed. "He's had chest pressure off and on for weeks. They told us it was reflux, then anxiety. This morning he got pain here." She touched her own left shoulder. "And here." Her hand moved toward her jaw. Walter shifted. "It comes and goes." "Any nausea?" Evelyn asked. "A little. Shortness of breath." He hesitated. June answered for him. "Yes." Evelyn looked at Tessa, who had already moved closer. "Room 7. Vitals now. Get him on the monitor." Tessa nodded. Walter tried to protest. "I can walk." Evelyn did not raise her voice. Not today. Something in her tone ended the argument. They settled him behind curtain 7. June stayed close, still holding the medication list. Tessa wrapped the cuff around Walter's arm, while Evelyn placed leads across his chest using the last good set from the drawer. The monitor flickered. Heart rate 118. Irregular. Blood pressure lower than Evelyn liked. Oxygen saturation acceptable, but his breathing had a shallow guard to it. Evelyn leaned close. "Mr. Briggs, when the pressure starts, does it feel sharp or heavy?" Walter looked at the ceiling. "Heavy. Like somebody set a toolbox on me." June's face crumpled. Evelyn kept her own face still. "Does it move?" "Sometimes to my back. Sometimes the jaw. But Dr. Kessler said last time that anxiety does strange things." "When was last time?" 8 days ago," June said. "Before that, 3 weeks. Before that, maybe 5 weeks. Evelyn looked at the chart Tessa had opened. 3 prior visits. Chest discomfort. Epigastric pain. Anxiety. Discharged. No EKG scanned into the record. No troponin. No referral. No stress test. Evelyn felt the old cold enter her body. It was the same cold she used to feel when a convoy radio went quiet. Not fear exactly. Recognition. She stepped out from the curtain just as Kessler approached with a coffee in one hand and Walter's chart in the other. "Room 7, he asked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "Walter Briggs, 64. Recurrent chest pressure with radiation to jaw and shoulder diaphoresis, irregular tachycardia, lower pressure than baseline. He needs a 12-lead EKG and cardiac enzymes." Kessler did not stop walking. "I know Mr. Briggs." June pulled the curtain aside. "Doctor, he's worse today." Kessler gave her his soft, public smile. "Mrs. Briggs, we've talked about how anxiety can mimic serious conditions." Evelyn watched Walter's fingers tighten around the blanket. Kessler entered the room and touched the stethoscope to Walter's chest for less than half a minute. He asked 2 questions, neither of them about exertion, family history, or the pattern of pain. Then he snapped off his gloves and dropped them into the trash. "Reflux with anxiety component," he said. "GI cocktail. Observe for 30 minutes. If improved, discharge." June stared at him. "That's all." Kessler's smile remained. "That is appropriate." Evelyn heard Tessa inhale. Walter looked embarrassed again, as if his body had wasted everyone's morning. "Sorry," he murmured. Evelyn looked at him. "You don't apologize for symptoms." Kessler turned his head slowly. "Excuse me." Evelyn kept her voice even. "I said he does not need to apologize." Kessler walked out. Evelyn followed. The hallway outside curtain 7 was narrow and bright. A housekeeping cart blocked one side. Kessler stopped near the medication room and opened the chart on the computer. She stood beside him. "Doctor, he needs cardiac workup." He typed. "Number. His symptoms are not consistent with simple reflux." "You already said that." "Then reassess." He stopped typing and looked at her. The physician station went quiet, and the way rooms go quiet when people are trying not to listen. Kessler's voice lowered. "Nurse Harper, you have a habit of mistaking persistence for expertise." Evelyn looked at the monitor visible through the gap in the curtain. Walter's heart rate had climbed. "I am reporting clinical deterioration. You are challenging a medical diagnosis. I am asking for an EKG. I am denying your request." Tessa stood at the supply counter, frozen, with a saline flush in her hand. Brian stared down at the staffing sheet. Kessler leaned close enough that Evelyn could smell mint on his breath. "This is not a battlefield. You do not outrank me here." "No," Evelyn said. "But neither does your ego outrank that man's heart." For a moment, Kessler did not move. Then he smiled. It was not the smile he used for families. It was the other one. The one nurses learned to fear. "You are one sentence away from suspension." Evelyn said nothing. Kessler straightened. "Give the medication I ordered. Recheck him in 30 minutes. And do not write your little editorial in the chart. My note will reflect his symptoms and your plan of care. Your note will reflect my diagnosis." Their eyes held. Evelyn had been stared down by colonel surgeons, grieving fathers, and boys with rifles who were more scared than cruel. Kessler's anger did not frighten her. What frightened her was how familiar it felt. Not the rage, the certainty, the belief that authority could bend reality if enough people were afraid to correct it. A call bell rang behind them, then another. Tessa slipped past into room 7 with the medication cup. Evelyn watched through the curtain as Walter accepted it with a trembling hand. June stood beside him, one palm pressed to her own mouth. The GI cocktail was pink. It looked harmless. That made it worse. Evelyn walked to the nurse's station and opened Walter's chart. She entered the vitals, the symptoms, the history as June had described it. She chose every word carefully. No accusations, no drama, just facts. Radiating discomfort, diaphoresis, irregular pulse, repeat presentation, physician notified. No new cardiac orders at this time. Before she could sign the note, Brian appeared beside her. "Evelyn." She kept her eyes on the screen. "Don't. You know he'll come after you. He can stand in line." Brian lowered his voice. "I'm serious. He's already talked to Meredith about you." Evelyn finally looked at him. "For what?" "For being disruptive." The word landed softly. Disruptive. Not unsafe. Not reckless. Not negligent. Disruptive. That was Cedar Ridge's favorite word for anyone who named the blood on the floor. Tessa came out of room 7 pale. Evelyn. Evelyn was already moving. Walter had shifted sideways in the bed. His hand gripped the rail. Sweat had gathered on his forehead. His breathing was shallow, controlled, and far too careful. June looked up. "Something's wrong." Evelyn took the blood pressure again. It had dropped. Not enough to make everyone run. Enough to make Evelyn's stomach turn. She placed 2 fingers against Walter's wrist. His pulse fluttered, stumbled, then hammered. "Mr. Briggs, look at me." His eyes found hers. "Pressure is worse." He nodded. Jaw. Another nod. Tessa whispered from behind her. Heart rate 126. Evelyn reached for oxygen. June's voice cracked. He said it was anxiety. Evelyn slid the nasal cannula beneath Walter's nose and adjusted the flow. "I know what he said." Walter tried to speak, but his breath caught. The monitor gave a sharp chirp. Then another. Evelyn looked at the rhythm strip. Her body made the decision before her mind finished the sentence. She stepped into the hallway. Kessler was at the coffee station laughing at something Dr. Elaine Pierce had said. Evelyn did not walk fast. She walked like every second had a weight, and she knew exactly how many she had left. Dr. Kessler. He turned annoyed before she finished his name. Mr. Briggs is deteriorating. Blood pressure dropping. Worsening radiating pain. Pulse irregular and accelerating. He needs immediate cardiac evaluation. Dr. Pierce looked between them with mild amusement. Kessler set down his coffee. We discussed this. No, Evelyn said. You dismissed it. The amusement left Pierce's face. Kessler's eyes hardened. Watch yourself. Evelyn heard Walter's monitor behind her. One alarm. Then two. She looked at Kessler and spoke clearly enough for the nearest nurse, the clerk, and Dr. Pierce to hear. Doctor, I am asking you to reassess a patient with worsening signs of cardiac compromise. The ER held its breath. Kessler stepped closer. And I am telling you to return to your assignment. Evelyn did not move. His voice dropped. You are not a doctor. No, she said. I am the person standing closest to the patient you are refusing to see. Tessa appeared at the curtain. Evelyn. The way she said it cut through the room. Evelyn turned. Walter Briggs' monitor began to alarm in a steady rising tone. Not the wild scream of a body already lost. Not yet. This was the sound Evelyn Harper had learned to respect more than panic. A warning with a pulse inside it. A narrow door before the room filled with grief. She moved before Dr. Kessler did. Tessa was already at Walter's bedside, one hand hovering near the oxygen tubing, the other braced against the rail, as if she could hold the man in place by force of will. June stood frozen beside the bed, her eyes wide, her mouth open around a question she could not shape. Walter was no longer trying to be polite. His jaw had gone tight. His face had lost color. Sweat collected in small, shining beads above his lip and along the thinning line of his hair. His right hand gripped the blanket. His left hand pressed against his chest. Evelyn took his wrist. The rhythm under her fingers stumbled, raced, vanished for half a beat, then came back wrong. Walter, she said low and firm, look at me. His eyes dragged toward her. Can't catch it, he whispered. Your breath. He nodded once. Behind her, Kessler entered the room with the stiff irritation of a man interrupted during something more important. Dr. Elaine Pierce followed him. Arms crossed, face unreadable. Kessler glanced at the monitor, then at Walter. Anxiety can escalate when staff create fear, he said. June turned on him. My husband can't breathe. Kessler gave her the same polished look he had probably used 1,000 times. Mrs. Briggs, I understand this is frightening. Evelyn looked at him. No, you don't. The room went still. Kessler's eyes cut to her. Evelyn did not look away. He has worsening chest pressure. Jaw pain, diaphoresis, unstable pulse, dropping pressure, and shortness of breath, she said. He needs an EKG now. He needs cardiac enzymes. He needs aspirin, unless contraindicated continuous monitoring and transfer if we can't treat him here. Kessler's voice sharpened. You do not give me orders. I am giving you the facts. You are giving me attitude. The monitor chirped again. Walter groaned, and June flinched as if the sound had struck her. Evelyn turned back to the patient. Tessa, get aspirin ready, but do not administer until physician order. Start a second line. 18 gauge if you can. Tessa moved. Kessler stepped in. Stop. Tessa froze with the IV kit in her hand. Evelyn did not. She opened the bedside drawer, pulled out a blood pressure cuff, and rechecked manually. The numbers confirmed what her body already knew. Too low. Not a collapse yet, but falling. Kessler, she said, dropping the title without meaning to. His face changed. What did you just call me? Evelyn stood slowly. Reassess him. You are suspended from patient care effective immediately. Then get someone else in here who knows what a heart attack looks like. Pierce inhaled sharply. Kessler stepped closer until he was almost chest to chest with her. This patient is under my care. Evelyn looked past him to Walter, who was fighting for each breath in small, controlled pulls. No, she said. He is under your authority. There is a difference. Kessler's jaw worked. For one strange second, Evelyn thought he might strike her right there in front of Walter's wife. Instead, he pointed toward the door. Out. Evelyn did not move. Now. She looked at Tessa. Tessa's eyes were wet, but her hands were steady. "Stay with him," Evelyn said. Kessler snapped, "She will do no such thing." Evelyn walked out before he could finish. Not because she was obeying him, because she had already made the decision. The supply room was 10 steps from curtain 7. Evelyn entered, shut the door behind her, and stood among shelves of saline bags, gauze catheter kits, and boxes of gloves that never seemed to come in the right size. The overhead light buzzed. Somewhere outside, Kessler's voice rose and fell like thunder behind glass. Her hand went to her phone. For one breath, she saw another room, a tent hospital in a desert night. A boy with blood in his teeth. A surgeon yelling for evacuation while the radio crackled and someone higher up demanded confirmation. She remembered the pause that had almost killed him. The request for authorization. The chain of command tightening around a body that did not have time for politics. Evelyn dialed from memory. The line rang twice. A woman answered, voice rough with sleep. "This better be death or good coffee." Naomi. The sleep vanished. "Evelyn, I need a cardiac bed." There was a soft rustle on the other end, then footsteps. "Where are you?" "Cedar Ridge." Male, 64. Recurrent chest pressure for weeks. Jaw and shoulder radiation. Diaphoretic. Irregular tachycardia. Pressure dropping. Attending says reflux and anxiety. No EKG. No troponins. No transfer. A silence. Then Dr. Naomi Ellison said Kessler. Evelyn closed her eyes. "Yes. How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm calling you from a supply room." Naomi swore under her breath. "Can you get him here?" "Not through official channels." "Then use unofficial ones that still leave a paper trail." "Patient consent. Document symptoms. Document refusal. Get him in an ambulance. He may code en route. He may die where he is." Evelyn opened her eyes. That was the clean truth. Naomi continued, voice crisp now. "I'll activate cath lab standby. Tell EMS to bring him straight to St. Anselm. I'll notify the transfer desk after he is already rolling. If anyone asks, he is coming for higher-level evaluation of unstable symptoms. Kessler will call it kidnapping. Then make sure the patient says yes." Evelyn swallowed once. "Thank you. Move Ev." The line ended. Evelyn slipped the phone back into her pocket and stepped into the hallway. Kessler was no longer in room 7. His voice carried from the physician's station where he was telling Brian to remove Evelyn from the assignment. Brian looked pale. Pierce watched from beside the medication room, silent and interested. Evelyn walked the other way. The ambulance bay doors hissed open as she pushed through them. Cold air hit her face. Snow was falling harder now, turning the world beyond the overhang into a curtain of white. Luke Sutter was restocking trauma bags in the back of his rig. He looked up once and closed the cabinet. Who? That was Luke. No wasted questions. Walter Briggs, room 7, likely MI. Kessler refuses workup. Luke's face tightened. "I brought Briggs in last month." Evelyn looked at him. "For chest pain. Pressure. Sweating." Kessler cleared him in under an hour. Luke stepped down from the ambulance. "What do you need?" "Transport to St. Anselm. Naomi Ellison is expecting him. Authorized. Number." Luke stared at her through the falling snow. Behind them, the hospital doors opened and closed, spilling light across the wet pavement. "You know what you're asking," he said. "Yes." "You know what they'll do to you." "Yes." "You got consent." "I'm getting it now." Luke looked toward the ER. He had the hard face of a man calculating risk not to himself but to the patient. "Give me 3 minutes," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Back entrance. No lights until you clear town unless he crashes." Luke grabbed the stretcher. "Then let's not let him crash." Evelyn returned through the ambulance doors and entered the ER like nothing had happened. That was how breaches survived long enough to matter. Not with speed, with control. Brian caught her arm at the nurse's station, not hard, only desperate. "Evelyn, don't." She looked down at his hand. He let go. His voice dropped. "Kessler is calling Meredith. He says you're unstable. He may be right. This is not funny. I'm not laughing." Brian's face twisted. "I can't protect you from this." "I didn't ask you to." She walked back into room 7. Walter looked worse. Tessa had stayed. She had not started the second line, but the kit lay open beside the bed. She looked at Evelyn with a question in her eyes. Evelyn nodded once. Tessa began. June stood close to her husband, one hand on his shoulder. Evelyn pulled the curtain mostly closed. "Mr. Briggs," she said, "I need to speak plainly." His breathing was thin. "Please, I believe your heart is in trouble. I believe you need care this hospital is not giving you right now." June's face crumpled. "I knew it." Evelyn kept her eyes on Walter. "I have arranged for a cardiologist at St. Anselm to receive you. If you agree, EMS will take you there for higher-level evaluation." Walter searched her face. "The doctor here said it was my nerves. I know what he said. If I go, does that make trouble for you?" Tessa looked down. June whispered Walter. Evelyn leaned closer. "Do not make this decision for me. Make it for your life." Walter closed his eyes. His hand tightened around June's. Then he opened them. "I want to go." Evelyn turned to June. "Do you consent to transport with him?" "Yes," June said. "Yes, God, yes." Evelyn documented the consent in the chart. She entered the symptoms again. She entered the patient's request for higher-level evaluation. She entered that the attending physician had been notified of worsening symptoms and no cardiac orders had been placed. Every word mattered. Every second cost something. Tessa slid the IV catheter into place with a clean, beautiful motion. "I got it," she whispered. "Good," Evelyn said. "Secure it." The curtain opened. Dr. Pierce stood there. For a moment, nobody moved. Pierce looked at the IV, then at Walter, then at Evelyn. Her face gave away almost nothing. "Kessler is looking for you," she said. Evelyn held her gaze. "I'm here." Pierce's eyes flicked to Walter's monitor. A long second passed. Then she stepped back from the curtain. Not permission, not help, but space. Evelyn did not waste it. Luke came through the ambulance bay entrance with the stretcher's snow melting on his shoulders. His partner, a quiet EMT named Caleb, followed with the monitor pack. Luke kept his voice professional. "Mr. Briggs, we're going to take a ride down to Denver." Walter gave a weak smile. "Always wanted breakfast in the city." June made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. They moved him with practiced care. Evelyn transferred the oxygen, checked the IV, handed Luke the printed notes, and spoke close to his ear. "Naomi knows. Watch rhythm. Pressure is soft. He may go fast." Luke nodded. "Copy." Tessa tucked Walter's blanket around him. Walter reached for Evelyn's wrist before they rolled. His grip was weak but deliberate. "You coming with us?" Evelyn shook her head. "I have to stay." "Why?" She glanced toward the physician's station where Kessler's voice was rising again. "Because someone has to explain why you left." Walter's eyes held hers. "Tell them I asked. I wrote it down." "Write this too," he whispered. "That I believed you." For a second, Evelyn could not speak. Then she patted his hand. "I know." They rolled him through the ambulance bay. Tessa walked with June carrying her coat and purse. At the doors, June turned and grabbed Evelyn with both arms. "Thank you," she whispered. Evelyn hugged her back once brief and hard. "Go with him." The doors opened. Cold air rushed in. Luke loaded Walter into the ambulance. Caleb climbed in after him. June took the side bench and buckled in with shaking hands. Evelyn stood at the edge of the bay as the doors closed. Luke looked at her through the front window. She gave one nod. The ambulance pulled away without sirens' tires whispering over slush. For 5 seconds, the world was quiet. Then Kessler spoke behind her. "Where is my patient?" Evelyn turned. He stood in the ambulance bay doorway with Brian behind him and Meredith Crane on speakerphone in his hand. His face had gone beyond anger into something cleaner and more dangerous. "Mr. Briggs requested transfer for higher-level cardiac evaluation," Evelyn said. Kessler took one step toward her. You transferred him. Yes. Without my authorization. With patient consent. You had no right. He had the right to leave. You manipulated a frightened man. I told him the truth. Kessler laughed, once a short, ugly sound. The truth, you don't know the truth. You know just enough medicine to be dangerous. Evelyn could still see the ambulance lights fading into the snow. No, she said. Dangerous is seeing a pattern and calling it anxiety because admitting you missed it would bruise your pride. Brian, whispered Evelyn. Meredith's voice crackled from the phone. Adrienne, is she admitting she removed the patient? Kessler lifted the phone closer. She is admitting gross insubordination, patient endangerment, and unauthorized transfer. Bring her to my office, Meredith said. No, Kessler replied. Security can bring her belongings outside. Evelyn looked at him. You're firing me because I saved a man you refused to treat. His nostrils flared. You don't know that you saved anyone. His phone rang before he could say more. He looked at the screen. For the first time that morning, uncertainty crossed his face. He answered. Kessler. Evelyn watched his eyes. At first annoyance, then stillness, then something close to fear. Naomi Ellison's voice was too faint for Evelyn to hear, but she knew the rhythm of the conversation by the way Kessler stopped breathing through his anger. He said, that's not possible. A pause. Then he was stable when he left. Another pause. His jaw tightened. No, I did not order an EKG because it was not indicated. The cold air moved between them. Finally, Kessler ended the call. No one spoke. Evelyn asked, is he alive? Kessler's eyes came up slowly. St. Anselm took him to cath lab. Is he alive? They stabilized him. Tessa, who had returned silently to the doorway, covered her mouth. Brian closed his eyes. Evelyn let the breath leave her body. For a moment, all the fear and anger drained away, leaving only the image of Walter alive under brighter lights with someone finally looking at the right organ. Then Kessler stepped toward her. You set me up. The words were soft. That made them worse. Evelyn stared at him. I warned you. You went behind my back. I went around your negligence. His hand shot out and closed around her upper arm. Hard. Tessa gasped. Brian, said Doctor. Kessler did not release her. You think one lucky guess makes you untouchable. Evelyn looked down at his hand. Pain radiated into her shoulder. His fingers dug into the same muscle where an old field injury sometimes flared in cold weather. She raised her eyes. Take your hand off me. He shoved her back one step close to the wall beside the ambulance bay doors. You are done, he said, each word shaking with fury. I will bury your license. I will make sure no hospital in this state touches you. You will lose your job, your pension, your reputation, everything. Tessa lifted her phone. Her voice trembled, but it carried. Dr. Kessler, I'm recording this. Let her go. Kessler turned his head. Delete it. Number. His grip tightened once. Evelyn did not flinch. She had been held at gunpoint by men with younger faces and emptier eyes. She had carried wounded soldiers through smoke so thick the world had become sound and heat. Adrian Kessler did not scare her. What scared her was that he believed this would work, that he believed the hospital would protect the hand on her arm before it protected the patient in the ambulance. Evelyn leaned in just enough for only him to hear. You still think this is about my job? His eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? She looked past him through the glass doors toward the road where the ambulance had disappeared. It means Walter Briggs is alive. Then she looked back at him. And now there's a record of what you did when you found out. Kessler's hand stayed on Evelyn's arm for 1 second too long. That was all it took. Tessa's phone caught the pressure of his fingers the way Evelyn's shoulder pulled under his grip, the way his body blocked the ambulance bay doors as if he owned the air between them. It caught his voice too low and shaking. You're finished, Harper. Evelyn looked at the phone, then at him. No, she said, you are being recorded. The words landed harder than a shout. Kessler released her arm as if her skin had burned him. He stepped back, smoothing the front of his white coat, trying to become a doctor again in front of witnesses. But the room had already seen the man beneath the coat. Brian stood near the nurse's station with his mouth slightly open. Tessa's hand trembled, but she kept filming. 2 security guards entered from the main corridor. One was younger, broad-shouldered, unsure where to put his eyes. The other was Frank Lowell, 58, former county deputy, slow-moving and decent. He had worked at Cedar Ridge long enough to know which doctors yelled for help because they were in danger and which ones yelled because they were embarrassed. Kessler pointed at Evelyn. "Remove her from the building. She is no longer authorized to be in this department." Frank looked at Evelyn's arm. The bruise was already rising. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I need you to come with me." Evelyn nodded once. "I understand." Tessa lowered the phone just enough to look at her. "I'm coming with you." Kessler snapped toward her. "You are suspended too." Tessa's face went white. Evelyn shook her head. "Tessa, stay. Number." The word surprised even Tessa. It came out small but solid. "No," she repeated. "I saw what happened." Kessler's eyes narrowed. "You saw a nurse endanger a patient and then create a scene." Tessa lifted the phone again. "I saw you put your hands on her." Silence opened around them. Frank cleared his throat. "Doctor, I'm going to escort them out now." Kessler turned his anger on him. "You will escort them out, then you will file a trespass notice." Frank did not answer. Evelyn walked to the locker room without looking back. Her shoes whispered over the tile. Every step felt too normal. The same hallway, the same supply carts, the same bulletin board with flu vaccine reminders and a faded flyer for Employee Appreciation Week. She opened her locker. Inside were spare socks, a protein bar, a black jacket, and a folded envelope with an army seal pressed faintly into one corner. She took out the jacket first, then the envelope. Tessa stood beside the door, wiping at her face with the heel of her hand. "I ruined everything Tessa said." Evelyn changed out of her scrub top and pulled on a gray thermal shirt. "You did the opposite. I got fired. You told the truth while your voice was shaking. That counts." Tessa laughed once, but it broke halfway. "What do we do now?" Evelyn folded her scrubs and placed them into her bag with careful hands. "We do not talk to hospital administration. We do not delete anything. We do not post anything. We do not answer unknown numbers." Tessa stared at the envelope. "What is that?" Evelyn slid it into the inside pocket of her jacket. An old number. For who? Evelyn looked at the dented locker door. In the warped metal, her reflection looked older than she felt. For people who still answer. They stepped outside into the parking lot. Snow had softened the world. The ambulance bay lights glowed behind them white against blue darkness. The cold hit Evelyn's lungs clean and sharp. For a moment, she stood still and listened to the muffled sounds of the hospital through the glass. A place could sound innocent from the outside. Machines hummed. Doors opened. Somebody laughed near the front desk. Inside, charts could be altered. Complaints could be buried. A doctor could nearly let a man die and still speak in the language of policy. Tessa hugged herself. "My parents are going to lose their minds." "Call them," Evelyn said. "Tell them you're safe. Tell them nothing else." "What about you?" Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I have one call to make." She walked toward the far edge of the parking lot where snow piled against a low stone wall. Her fingers found the number without looking. She had not dialed it in 11 years. She had told herself the part of her life connected to that line had ended in sand and rotor wash and a hospital tent that smelled like blood plastic and burned diesel. The call connected after 2 rings. A man's voice answered. "Secure medical oversight. Identify." Evelyn looked at the hospital. "Nightingale 7. The line went quiet. Then the voice changed. "Authenticate." Evelyn gave the code. There was another pause, longer this time. She imagined a screen waking somewhere. Her name appearing in a system she had hoped never to touch again. Evelyn Harper. Former sergeant. Combat Medical Detachment. Decorated. Inactive civilian status. The voice returned. "Nightingale 7 authenticated. State your emergency." Evelyn watched snow collect on the sleeve Kessler had grabbed. "I am reporting systemic patient harm at Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center in Redstone, Colorado. Retaliation against medical personnel. suppression of safety complaints, possible alteration of patient records. One patient transferred today after physician refusal to reassess probable cardiac emergency. Are you safe? Evelyn glanced at Tessa, who stood near her car with her phone pressed to her ear, crying silently. For the moment, are local authorities involved? Hospital security only. Are you willing to go on record? The question cut through the cold. That was the line. Before that question, a person could still pretend they had only made a call. After it, a person became evidence. A name in affidavits, a witness in rooms with no windows, a target for anyone who needed the truth to look unreliable. Evelyn saw Walter Briggs' hand gripping the blanket. She saw June's face when Kessler called fear anxiety. She saw Jennifer Lyle 6 months earlier. Her head bowed under fluorescent light, whispering that something behind her eye felt like it was tearing open. Dr. Pierce had called it migraine. Jennifer had died before breakfast. Evelyn closed her eyes. Yes, she said, I will go on record. The man on the line spoke to someone away from the receiver. When he returned, his voice was no longer procedural. Remain where you are. Do not re-enter the building. Do not surrender your phone documents or personal devices to hospital staff. Federal personnel are being dispatched. Evelyn opened her eyes. How long? Shortly. She almost smiled. Federal people never said soon. Copy. Nightingale 7. Yes, your credentials triggered a notification at Maine Justice. Evelyn's chest tightened. Of course they had. The man continued. There may be contact from senior officials. Do not discuss details until federal agents arrive. I understand. The call ended. Evelyn stood in the snow with the phone in her hand. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then it buzzed. The screen showed a name she had seen on television more often than in person over the past year. Daniel Harper. She answered. Hi, sweetheart. Her son did not waste breath. Mom, are you hurt? Evelyn looked at her arm. Number. That was not an answer. It will bruise. A sound came through the line. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Both held behind discipline. Who touched you? Daniel. Who? Dr. Adrian Kessler. Silence. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had changed. It was no longer her son calling from a long day in Washington. It was the Attorney General of the United States, cold and exact. Are you with federal agents? Not yet. They're on their way. I am recusing myself from operational control immediately. Deputy Attorney General Rachel Baines will supervise any federal action involving Cedar Ridge. I need that clean from the first minute. Evelyn stared at the hospital windows. They will say I used you. They were going to say that anyway. I did not call you. I know. How? Daniel's voice softened. Because you would rather bleed quietly than ask me to hold a bandage. Evelyn looked down. The snow blurred for a moment. I transferred a patient against physician direction. Was the patient dying? Yes. Did he consent? Yes. Did you document? Yes. Then stand still and let the law catch up. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. The cold took it fast. I'm sorry this touches your office. Mom. She heard him breathe. You taught me what my office is for. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Daniel said, do not stand alone. Keep the young nurse with you. Preserve the video. When the agents arrive, answer their questions. Nothing more. Are you safe? She asked. He gave a humorless laugh. I have better walls. Not what I asked. I'm fine, angry but fine. That sounds like me. No, Daniel said. You get quiet when you're angry. That's worse. Evelyn looked toward the ER doors. I have to go. I know. Call me when you can. I love you. I love you too. And Mom. Yes, I'm proud of you. The line clicked off. Evelyn held the phone to her ear for a second longer. Tessa approached, wiping her face. Was that him? Evelyn put the phone away. Yes, the Attorney General. My son. Tessa looked at her like the ground had moved. You never mentioned that. He has his job, I have mine. Tessa gave a shaky laugh. Your family dinners must be terrifying. Evelyn almost smiled. He still burns toast. The first black SUV turned into the parking lot without headlights flashing. Then another. Then a third. They moved through the snow with quiet purpose and parked in a clean line near the emergency entrance. Doors opened. Men and women stepped out in dark coats, badges at their belts, tablets and hand sidearms hidden beneath jackets. No one rushed. No one shouted. That was how Evelyn knew they were serious. The lead agent was a woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair pulled back at the nape of her neck. She had the eyes of someone who had spent years listening to people lie and had not become cynical, only precise. She walked straight to Evelyn. Sergeant Harper, former sergeant. Special Agent Mara Quinn, Department of Justice Healthcare Fraud Division. She showed her credentials. Evelyn glanced at them, then at her face. I need to report what happened today. Agent Quinn looked at the bruise on Evelyn's arm. We will get to today. First, are you safe enough to continue? Yes. Agent Quinn turned to Tessa. You are Nurse Monroe. Tessa nodded. I have video. Do not send it to anyone. Do not edit it. Do not upload it. My team will preserve the original. Tessa nodded again, gripping her phone like a lifeline. Agent Quinn looked back at Evelyn. How many incidents are we talking about? Evelyn let out a slow breath. Documented by me at least 30 serious concerns over 6 years. Ignored symptoms. Delayed transfers. Discharges against nursing objections. Medication warnings overridden. Complaints from families routed to administration and then buried. Agent Quinn did not react. And undocumented. Evelyn looked at the glowing hospital. More. How many more? Enough that I stopped sleeping before shifts. Agent Quinn held her gaze. That answer told her more than a number. One of the agents approached from behind Quinn. Warrant is signed. Records preservation order is active. Local magistrate acknowledged federal jurisdiction due to Medicare billing and potential civil rights retaliation. Quinn nodded. Move. The team entered the hospital. This time, no one from Cedar Ridge controlled the doors. Inside, the temperature changed at once. The ER noise thinned into a different kind of silence as agents spread through the department. One went to the nurses' station. One to the physician workroom. 2 toward administration. Another began photographing posted schedules, assignment boards, and access terminals. Meredith Crane arrived from the main corridor in a camel-colored coat thrown over sweatpants, her hair pinned badly, her face tight with panic disguised as outrage. What is happening in my hospital? Agent Quinn handed her a document. Federal warrant. You are required to preserve all electronic and physical records, including patient charts, internal communications, incident reports, quality reviews, settlement documents, and complaint files. Meredith looked at the pages, then at Kessler, who stood near the physician desk with his arms folded. This is absurd, she said. Quinn's voice stayed even. Obstruction is not absurd. It is a felony. Meredith's mouth closed. Kessler stepped forward. This is based on the word of a disgruntled nurse. Agent Quinn looked at him. Dr. Adrian Kessler. Yes. Do not leave the premises. His face darkened. Am I under arrest? Not at this moment. At this moment, he repeated. Quinn did not blink. At this moment. Tessa stood beside Evelyn near the ambulance bay doors, pale but upright. Brian hovered a few feet away as if he wanted to speak, but had forgotten how. An agent sat at a workstation and began imaging the system. Another asked the unit clerk to step back from the shred bin. A third opened the door to risk management with the key taken from Meredith's trembling hand. Evelyn watched Kessler watch the agents. His anger was still there, but underneath it, something else had appeared. Calculation. Fear. He knew where the bodies were hidden. Not bodies in graves. Bodies in discharge summaries. Bodies in settlement folders. Bodies in phone calls never returned. Agent Quinn guided Evelyn into a small consultation room near the chapel corridor. Tessa came too. The room had a round table, 3 chairs, a tissue box, and a painting of aspens in autumn. The painting had always bothered Evelyn. No hospital room should pretend so hard to be peaceful. Quinn placed a recorder on the table. State your name. Evelyn Marie Harper. Occupation. Registered nurse. Emergency department. Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center. Former United States Army combat medic. Tell me about Walter Briggs. Evelyn began with his arrival. She kept her voice steady. She gave times symptoms names. She described June's concerns, Walter's history, the prior visits, the missing cardiac workup. She described Kessler's refusal, the deterioration, the call to Naomi, the transfer, and the confirmation that Walter had gone to cath lab. Quinn interrupted only to clarify. What time did you notify Dr. Kessler of worsening symptoms? Approximately 6:51. Witnesses. Tessa Monroe. Dr. Elaine Pierce was nearby. Brian Voss may have heard part of it. Did Dr. Kessler order an EKG? Number. Cardiac labs. Number. Transfer. Number. Did Mr. Briggs consent to transfer? Yes. Did you document consent? Yes. Did Dr. Kessler touch you? Evelyn paused. The room seemed smaller. Yes. Describe it. He grabbed my upper arm with his right hand, hard enough to cause pain. He shoved me backward toward the wall. He threatened my career and license. Tessa Monroe recorded this. Tessa lifted the phone. Yes, she whispered. Quinn nodded to another agent who took the phone carefully and began the preservation process. Then Quinn looked back at Evelyn. You said there were prior incidents. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. For a moment, the room became full of ghosts. Jennifer Lyle, she said. Quinn wrote the name. 32. Severe headache. Visual disturbance. Vomiting. Dr. Elaine Pierce diagnosed migraine. Husband brought her back 3 hours later. She was not re-examined by a physician. She died of a ruptured aneurysm before morning. Tessa covered her mouth. Evelyn continued. Michael Grant. 59. Fever, confusion, low pressure. Possible sepsis. Dr. Roth discharged him with viral syndrome. Died within 24 hours. Quinn's pen moved. Arnold Bound Pike, 71. Veteran. Shortness of breath, chest tightness. Kessler documented anxiety. He collapsed at home that night. Evelyn kept going. Names became rooms. Rooms became times. Times became failures. A woman with stroke symptoms told to sleep off stress. A teenager with abdominal pain sent home twice before his appendix ruptured. A diabetic man whose lab result flagged critical and sat unseen for 4 hours. A widow who came to the ER with a folder full of notes and left with a non-disclosure agreement. Tessa cried silently. Quinn's expression did not change, but her pen slowed. Finally, Evelyn stopped. The consultation room hummed. Agent Quinn closed her notebook. How long have you been trying to report this internally? 6 years. To whom? Charge nurses. Medical director. Risk management. Administration. State complaint portal once, but I did not have enough documentation then. Why not go outside sooner? Evelyn looked at her hands. There were old scars across 2 knuckles from a night she rarely remembered on purpose. Because good people still work here. Because this town needs an emergency room. Because I thought if I kept documenting, someone inside the system would fix it. Quinn waited. Evelyn looked up. And because I was afraid. Tessa turned to her. Evelyn did not look away from Quinn. I have been under fire. I have held pressure on wounds while mortars landed close enough to shake dust into my teeth. But losing a civilian career slowly, quietly, with everyone deciding you are the problem, that scares people too. Quinn nodded once. Outside the room, footsteps hurried past. An agent opened the door. Mara. Quinn stepped into the hall. Evelyn heard only pieces. Locked cabinet. Complaint files. Settlement summaries. Do not report. Quinn returned with a different look in her eyes. Ms. Harper, we found a cabinet in Dr. Kessler's office. Evelyn did not move. What was in it? Patient complaints. Dozens. Some marked, resolved with confidential settlement. Several connected to names you just gave me. Tessa whispered, "Oh my God." Quinn continued. We also found printed emails between Dr. Kessler, Dr. Roth, Dr. Pierce, and Meredith Crane discussing how to avoid state reporting thresholds. Evelyn felt the floor tilt under her. Not surprise. Confirmation. Some part of her had always known. Another part had prayed she was wrong. Quinn's phone rang. She answered, listened, and looked at Evelyn. Walter Briggs is alive. St. Anselm confirms myocardial infarction. Intervention successful, critical, but stable. Evelyn closed her eyes. The breath that left her did not feel like relief at first. It felt like pain, leaving a wound too quickly. Tessa began to sob. Evelyn reached for her hand and held it. Quinn ended the call. Dr. Ellison also reported Mr. Briggs had 3 prior Cedar Ridge visits for similar symptoms. No cardiac testing found in transferred records. Evelyn opened her eyes. June's voice came back to her. They told us it was reflux, then anxiety. Quinn stood. I need to brief the United States Attorney's Office and Deputy A.G. Baines. This investigation is expanding immediately. Through the consultation room window, Evelyn could see agents moving through the ER with boxes and evidence bags. Meredith Crane sat in a hallway chair with her phone in both hands, not speaking. Kessler stood near the physician station arguing with a man in a suit who had arrived too late to stop anything. Tessa looked at Evelyn. What happens to us now? Evelyn watched an agent remove a stack of complaint folders from Kessler's office. We tell the truth. Tessa swallowed. And if they come after us? Evelyn looked down at the purple fingerprints on her arm. They already did. Outside, beyond the glass doors, the first news van pulled into the parking lot. Its tires cut through the snow and stopped beneath the hospital sign. Then another followed. Lights rose in the dark. Cameras came out. Reporters adjusted coats and checked microphones while the town of Redstone slept beneath the mountains. Evelyn stood in the consultation room, no longer wearing scrubs, no longer on the schedule, no longer protected by the silence that had kept Cedar Ridge standing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Stay with Agent Quinn. Do not face the cameras alone. Evelyn typed back with one hand. Walter is alive. The reply came seconds later. Then, so is the reason. Evelyn put the phone away. Agent Quinn opened the consultation room door. Ms. Harper, I need you with me. The press has the story, and hospital counsel is already spinning it. Evelyn stepped into the hall. Kessler saw her from across the ER. For the first time since she had known him, he did not look angry. He looked cornered. Agent Quinn walked beside Evelyn toward the front entrance where cameras flashed against the glass. Tessa followed. Behind them, federal agents carried out the first sealed box of Cedar Ridge records. Evelyn kept walking. The front entrance of Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center had always opened with a tired mechanical sigh, as if even the doors were exhausted from letting people in scared and sending them out confused. That morning, they opened into a wall of light. Camera lights, headlights, phone screens. The snow in the parking lot reflected all of it back at her until the world looked overexposed and unreal. Agent Mara Quinn moved half a step ahead, her body placed between Evelyn and the closest reporter. Tessa stayed on Evelyn's left, pale, clutching her coat closed with one hand, while her other hand stayed wrapped around the phone that held the video. A woman in a red parka pushed a microphone forward. Ms. Harper, did you report Cedar Ridge to the federal government? Another voice shouted over her. Is it true your son is the Attorney General? Did you transfer a patient without permission? Were you fired this morning? Is Cedar Ridge under criminal investigation? Evelyn did not answer. Quinn lifted one hand. Ms. Harper is a federal witness. She will not be making a statement. The reporters surged closer anyway. Their boots crushed fresh snow into gray slush. Their breath smoked in the cold. A camera operator backed into a parked sedan and kept filming as if pain belonged to someone else. Evelyn looked past them to the hospital sign. Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center. Compassion. Excellence. Community. The words sat clean and bright above the entrance while federal agents carried sealed boxes through the doors behind her. Tessa whispered, I can't breathe. Evelyn touched her elbow. Eyes on me. Tessa turned, trembling. In through your nose. Hold, out slow. Tessa obeyed. Again. Again. The reporters kept shouting. Agent Quinn guided them toward one of the SUVs. A young agent opened the rear door. Evelyn climbed in first, then Tessa. The door closed, and the outside noise became a dull roar behind tinted glass. Tessa pressed both hands to her face. My mom is going to see this. Evelyn looked at the hospital through the window. Yes, my dad too. Yes, my whole family. Evelyn turned to her. Then they will see you standing next to the truth. Tessa laughed, once broken and frightened. That sounds beautiful until everyone starts calling you a liar. Agent Quinn got into the front passenger seat and looked back. That part has already started. She held up her phone. A press statement from Cedar Ridge had gone live less than 12 minutes after the first news van arrived. Quinn read it aloud, voice flat. Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center is cooperating fully with federal authorities after an incident involving a former employee who appears to have acted outside hospital policy. Patient privacy laws limit our ability to respond to specific allegations, but we strongly deny any claim of systemic wrongdoing. Our physicians and staff remain committed to safe, evidence-based care. Tessa stared. Former employee. They fired us 10 minutes ago. Quinn scrolled. There is more. She did not need to read it. Evelyn could see the shape of it on her face. What did they say? Quinn looked at her. They are describing you as a nurse with a history of insubordination. Evelyn nodded slowly. There it is. Tessa leaned forward. That's not true. It is true enough for people who do not know what the word means here, Evelyn said. Quinn studied her. What does it mean here? Evelyn looked back at Cedar Ridge. It means I asked the wrong questions in rooms where the right people could hear. The SUV pulled away from the entrance, crawling past reporters who turned their cameras toward the windows. Evelyn felt the weight of every lens even through the dark glass. A man near the curb held up his phone and yelled something she could not hear. Tessa flinched anyway. The agent driving took them to a small federal field office on the edge of Redstone, a low brick building that usually handled forestry fraud mining permits and the occasional interstate drug case. That morning, its conference room became a command post. Phones rang. Laptops opened. Names went onto whiteboards. Walter Briggs, Jennifer Lyle, Michael Grant, Arnold Pike, Risk Management, Dr. Adrian Kessler, Dr. Calvin Roth, Dr. Elaine Pierce, Meredith Crane. Evelyn sat at the end of the table with a paper cup of coffee cooling between her hands. She had not taken a sip. The bruise on her arm had deepened from red to purple. Tessa sat beside her, wrapped in a blanket someone had found in a supply closet. Agent Quinn stood near the whiteboard speaking with two prosecutors by secure video. Evelyn could hear pieces. Retaliation, complaint suppression, federal billing exposure, potential obstruction, preserve all metadata. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. She was back in a field hospital again, listening to officers talk over maps, while medics waited to hear which road had been cleared and which one still had bodies in it. Tessa's phone buzzed. She looked down and went still. What is it? Evelyn asked. Tessa turned the screen. A local news clip showed Roland Tate, Cedar Ridge's newly hired crisis attorney, standing outside the hospital beneath a black umbrella. He was handsome, in the expensive way of men who got paid to make disasters sound reasonable. His navy coat had no snow on it. Someone held the umbrella for him from just outside the frame. His voice filled the tiny speaker. Cedar Ridge is the victim of a reckless and politically motivated intrusion. A recently terminated nurse with a documented history of conflict with physicians appears to have used her personal family connection to trigger federal action against a respected rural hospital. We are confident the facts will show that our doctors acted appropriately under difficult emergency conditions. A reporter asked, "Are you referring to Evelyn Harper's son, Attorney General Daniel Harper?" Tate lowered his chin in practiced sadness. "I am saying the public deserves to know whether federal power is being used to settle a workplace dispute." Tessa shut off the video as if it burned. He's making it sound like you called your son. I did not. I know, but people won't. Evelyn looked at the cup between her hands. That is why they said it. Agent Quinn came over. We expected this. Evelyn looked up. Good. I hate surprising the government. Quinn almost smiled. The hospital is going to push 3 themes. You are disgruntled. Your son is corrupt. Cedar Ridge is essential to the town, so attacking it means attacking the community. Tessa pulled the blanket tighter. People will believe that. Some will, Quinn said. Evidence moves slower than fear. Evelyn's phone rang before she could answer. Unknown number. Quinn held out her hand. May I? Evelyn gave her the phone. Quinn connected it to a recorder and nodded. Evelyn answered. This is Evelyn Harper. A man's voice came through smooth as warm oil. Ms. Harper, this is Roland Tate. I represent Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center. Agent Quinn's eyes sharpened. Evelyn said I saw you on television. I regret that matters have become public so quickly. Public narratives tend to harden before people have a chance to behave wisely. Is that why you called to behave wisely? A soft chuckle. I called to offer you a way out. Tessa looked up. Evelyn leaned back in the chair. I didn't know I was trapped. Everyone is trapped at the beginning of a scandal. The question is whether they find a door or dig deeper. Quinn wrote something on a legal pad. Evelyn said nothing. Tate continued. Cedar Ridge is prepared to offer a generous separation package. 3 years of salary. Benefits. A neutral employment reference. An additional confidential payment of $750,000 for emotional distress related to this morning's unfortunate encounter. Tessa's eyes widened. The room went quieter around them. Evelyn looked at the recorder. What would Cedar Ridge want in return? Clarity. Try again. A statement from you acknowledging that your concerns may have been influenced by the stress of the situation, and that you did not intend to suggest systemic wrongdoing by Cedar Ridge or its physicians. You want me to walk back my federal statement. We want you to correct an overreaction. You want me to lie. Tate's voice stayed pleasant. I want you to survive. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the phone. Is that a threat? It is a professional assessment. Ms. Harper hospitals have records, personnel files, peer complaints, incident reports. Every nurse who has practiced long enough has made mistakes. Every combat medic has memories that do not read cleanly under fluorescent lights. If this becomes adversarial, your entire life becomes relevant. The conference room stilled. Evelyn heard the hum of the overhead lights. Tate lowered his voice. They will examine every patient you lost, every order you questioned, every chart you touched. They will ask why you stayed at Cedar Ridge for 6 years if it was so dangerous. They will ask whether you enjoyed feeling more competent than physicians. They will ask whether your son used his office to protect his mother. Evelyn closed her eyes. She saw Daniel, at 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with cereal in his hair, while she studied anatomy flashcards after a 12-hour shift. She saw him at 17, wearing his father's old watch to graduation. She saw him standing in a cemetery, one hand on her shoulder, both of them too stunned to cry properly. She opened her eyes. My son does not need me to lie to protect him. Pride is expensive. So is silence. The pleasantness left Tate's voice. $750,000, Ms. Harper. By 5 o'clock. After that, Cedar Ridge will defend itself with every lawful tool available. Evelyn looked across the room at Tessa, who had lost her job before breakfast, because she chose to record the truth. Number. Think carefully. I did. She ended the call. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Tessa whispered $750,000. Evelyn set the phone down. Yes? You didn't even pause. Evelyn looked at her. I paused. You just did not see where. Agent Quinn stopped the recorder. That call helps us. Good, Evelyn said. But her hands had started shaking. She put them under the table before Tessa noticed. By noon, Redstone had split open. At the diner near the courthouse, people argued over coffee. At the hardware store, a man called Evelyn a hero and another said she was going to get people killed if Cedar Ridge closed. Outside the hospital, employees walked past cameras with their heads down, some angry, some terrified, some relieved that the thing they had whispered about for years had finally become too loud to bury. Cedar Ridge pushed harder. Roland Tate appeared on national television before lunch. He had found 2 former supervisors willing to say Evelyn had a pattern of difficulty with authority. He displayed copies of write-ups on screen. The anchors did not know that each write-up followed a safety report. The viewers did not know that Cedar Ridge called whistleblowing disruptive conduct when it appeared in personnel language. A cable host asked whether small-town hospitals were under attack from federal bureaucrats. Another asked whether Attorney General Harper should resign. A third asked if nurses had begun believing internet research made them doctors. Evelyn watched none of it after the first clip. She sat in a smaller interview room while Agent Quinn took a formal statement from Tessa. Through the wall, Evelyn heard Tessa cry once, stop herself and keep talking. That mattered. Not the crying, the continuing. At 1:30, Daniel called. Evelyn stepped into a quiet hallway. You eating? He asked. Number. Eat. I am not 12. You get mean when you skip meals. I am always mean. Not to me. She leaned against the wall. His voice was tired in a way he tried to hide. Mom, I filed my recusal memorandum. It is public now. Deputy Attorney General Rachel Baines has full oversight. I will have no role in investigative decisions, charging decisions, or prosecution strategy. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. They are dragging your name into it. They were always going to. You worked your whole life for that office. And you worked your whole life to become the kind of person who does not watch a patient die because a powerful man said, be quiet. Evelyn closed her eyes. Daniel softened. Listen to me. Rachel is good, better than good. She hates sloppy cases and she hates bullies with lawyers. That sounds useful. She will want to meet you soon. Do I scare her? Mom, you scare senators. Evelyn almost laughed. Daniel did too, then the silence came back. He said they offered you money. Evelyn opened her eyes. How did you know? Because that is the first honest thing guilty people do. $750,000. Daniel exhaled. You okay? Number. Good answer. I thought about the mortgage. Of course you did. I thought about disappearing. Of course. I said no. I know. Evelyn looked toward the interview room door. Tessa is frightened. She should be. Courage does not make people less frightened. You sound like your father. Daniel was quiet for a second. Dad would have punched Kessler. Yes. And then asked if the patient lived. Yes. Then he would have told you that you did right. Evelyn's throat tightened. Daniel said, So I am telling you. She pressed a hand to her eyes. I have to go. Eat first. The call ended. Evelyn stood there until she could breathe without making noise. When she returned to the conference room, Agent Quinn had a sandwich waiting. No onions, Quinn said. Evelyn stared. How did you know? Your son. Of course. She sat and ate half because there was no graceful way to refuse food delivered by the Attorney General through a federal agent. At 3:15, the first real crack appeared in Cedar Ridge's wall. Molly Sanchez, a nurse who had worked at Cedar Ridge for 11 years, walked to the courthouse steps with her husband on one side and an employment attorney on the other. She wore a black coat and no makeup. Her hands shook so badly that the paper rattled when she unfolded it. Every camera in Redstone turned toward her. Evelyn watched from the federal office standing behind Agent Quinn's shoulder. Molly began. My name is Molly Sanchez. I was a registered nurse at Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center from 2013 until this morning when I resigned. Her voice wavered, then steadied. I am here because Evelyn Harper is telling the truth. The room around Evelyn went silent. Molly kept reading. I personally witnessed Dr. Adrian Kessler dismiss patients with serious symptoms, refuse reasonable requests for testing, and retaliate against nurses who questioned his decisions. I filed 4 internal safety reports. After each report, my schedule changed, my evaluations worsened, and I was warned that I was not being a team player. She looked up from the paper. I stayed because I needed the job. I stayed because I thought someone else would fix it. I am ashamed of that. I am not staying quiet anymore. The reporters shouted questions. Molly's attorney guided her away. Evelyn stood frozen. Tessa came to the doorway, eyes red from her statement. Was that Molly? Evelyn nodded. Tessa's mouth trembled. She hated conflict. She still does, Evelyn said. That is why it cost her something. Within an hour, 2 more staff members contacted the DOJ. A respiratory therapist named Glenn Porter, a lab technician named Ashley Reed. Glenn reported repeated delays in care for patients in respiratory distress because physicians refused to admit them until oxygen numbers became impossible to ignore. Ashley reported critical lab values acknowledged late, then backfilled with notes that made them appear reviewed sooner. By 4:30, Luke Sutter gave a statement. He described multiple transports from Cedar Ridge where patients worsened immediately after discharge or transfer. He named Walter Briggs' prior ambulance call. He named an elderly veteran sent home with panic, who later died of a pulmonary embolism. He said Evelyn was not the only person who had known. She was just the first one willing to burn for it, he told the investigator. Evelyn heard that later from Agent Quinn and looked away. By evening, Walter Briggs was awake enough to speak. St. Anselm released a short statement with his consent. It said he had suffered a myocardial infarction, received emergency cardiac intervention, and remained in guarded but stable condition. Then Walter himself recorded a video from his hospital bed. June sat beside him holding his hand in both of hers. Walter looked smaller without his canvas jacket surrounded by monitors and white sheets. His voice was weak but clear. My name is Walter Briggs. I went to Cedar Ridge because I was scared something was wrong with my heart. I was told it was anxiety. Evelyn Harper was the only person who acted like my life mattered. I am alive because she would not let them ignore me. June leaned into the frame. We tried to tell them. We tried for weeks. The video spread faster than Cedar Ridge could answer. For the first time all day, the questions on television shifted. Why had Walter gone to Cedar Ridge 3 times? Why was there no cardiac testing? Why had his symptoms been called anxiety? Why had the hospital attacked the nurse before explaining the care? Roland Tate called Evelyn again at 5:30. Agent Quinn recorded again. Tate's voice was no longer smooth. Ms. Harper's circumstances have changed. Evelyn looked at Quinn. I noticed. Cedar Ridge is prepared to increase its offer to $1 million. Tessa, standing in the doorway, whispered, "Oh my God." Evelyn said no. You did not hear the terms. I heard the first offer. You are making this town bleed. No. Cedar Ridge did that. I just stopped holding the bandage over the wound. Tate's breathing changed. You are enjoying this. Evelyn's voice dropped. You have no idea what I am feeling. I know exactly what you are. You are a nurse who got a taste of power and confused it with righteousness. Agent Quinn's pen stopped moving. Evelyn leaned toward the phone. Walter Briggs is alive. Do not hide behind the patient. He is not a shield. He is the evidence. Tate went quiet. When he spoke again, his tone had sharpened into something bare. We are going to review every chart you touched at Cedar Ridge. Every complaint against you. Every military record available. Every decision you made in uniform and in this hospital. We will find the bodies in your past, Ms. Harper. Everyone has them. Evelyn looked at the wall where the names of Cedar Ridge patients had been written in black marker. Jennifer Lyle, Michael Grant, Arnold Pike, Walter Briggs. She said, mine have names. I remember them. Tate said nothing. Evelyn continued. That is the difference between us. She ended the call. This time her hands did not shake. At 9:04 that night, Dr. Naomi Ellison called. Evelyn answered from the federal office break room, where cold coffee and untouched donuts sat beneath fluorescent lights. Is Walter worse? Evelyn asked. He's stable, Naomi said, but I found something. Evelyn straightened. What? I reviewed the Cedar Ridge records that came with him. 3 days before his heart attack, Kessler prescribed verapamil. Evelyn frowned. With his valve history? Yes. That should have flagged. It did. Evelyn went cold. Naomi's voice stayed controlled, but Evelyn could hear the anger beneath it. The electronic record generated a contraindication warning due to documented severe aortic stenosis. Kessler overrode it. Evelyn leaned against the counter. What reason did he enter? Physician aware. Continue. The room seemed to narrow around Evelyn. Could that have contributed? It may have triggered hemodynamic instability. I cannot say alone, not yet. But combined with untreated cardiac disease, yes. It could have pushed him over the edge. Evelyn closed her eyes. He had not only missed the fire, he may have poured fuel on it. Naomi continued. I already sent it through the proper channel to Agent Quinn. I wanted you to know because you carried this man out of there with half the hospital calling you reckless. Evelyn swallowed. How many times did he override warnings? That is the question. After the call, Evelyn found Quinn in the conference room. The agent already knew. A new team had joined the investigation remotely. Forensic pharmacists, data analysts, electronic medical record specialists. They began pulling override logs from Cedar Ridge's system starting with Kessler, Roth, and Pierce. By midnight, preliminary numbers appeared. Dozens of high-severity medication warnings overridden, some harmless in context, some questionable, some indefensible. Agent Quinn stood at the whiteboard and wrote the number 47, then circled it. Evelyn stared at it. 47. High-risk overrides requiring further review across 3 physicians in 3 years. How many patients harmed? We do not know yet. Evelyn looked at the circle around the number. How many died? Quinn did not answer quickly. That was answer enough. Tessa sat at the table with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. My God, she whispered. We thought they were careless. Evelyn looked toward the dark window where her reflection stared back with hollow eyes. No, she said. Careless is dropping a tray. This is choosing not to look because looking slows you down. At 2 in the morning, the federal office was quiet except for keyboards and low voices. Evelyn sat alone in the hallway outside the conference room. Someone had found her a clean sweatshirt. The hospital smell was gone from her clothes, but she could still feel Cedar Ridge on her skin. Her phone buzzed. A message from June Briggs. Walter wants you to know he is still here. A second message followed. So am I. Evelyn held the phone in both hands. For the first time that day, she let herself bow her head. Not for long. Just enough to let the weight pass through instead of staying lodged in her chest. A door opened down the hall. Agent Quinn stepped out. Deputy Attorney General Rachel Baines is arriving in the morning. She wants to meet you in person. Evelyn looked up. She read my statement. Yes, and Quinn leaned against the wall across from her. She said you document like a sniper. Evelyn huffed softly. That a compliment. From her yes. Evelyn looked at the bruise on her arm. The fingerprints had darkened. They looked almost deliberate now, like evidence stamped into skin. Quinn followed her gaze. You know they are going to come harder. Yes, they will try to make you angry. They will try to make you sound arrogant. They will ask why a nurse believed she knew more than doctors. Evelyn's eyes stayed on the bruise. I did not know more than every doctor. Number. I knew more than the one refusing to look. Quinn nodded. That is the line. Hold it. Evelyn stood. Her knees ached. Her head throbbed. Her whole body felt like the moment after an evacuation when the helicopter lifts away and the silence rushes back in around whatever blood is left on the ground. From the conference room, she could hear Tessa giving another detail to an investigator. Still shaking, still talking. Through the window at the end of the hall, Redstone slept under snow and satellite trucks at town, caught between the fear of losing its hospital and the horror of learning what that hospital had hidden. Evelyn walked back into the conference room. On the whiteboard, the names waited. The records waited. The dead waited. Agent Quinn handed her a fresh legal pad. Start wherever you need to. Evelyn sat down. She wrote the first name, then the next, then the next. By dawn, the legal pad in front of Evelyn Harper looked less like a witness note and more like a casualty roster. Jennifer Lyle, Michael Grant, Arnold Pike, Walter Briggs. Names she had carried in fragments for years now sat in black ink under federal lights. Some were alive, some were dead. Some had families who still believed bad luck had taken them. Some had signed agreements in quiet rooms because grief came with bills, and Cedar Ridge knew exactly when to offer money. At 6:17 in the morning, Deputy Attorney General Rachel Baines walked into the federal field office with no coat over her suit, snow melting on the shoulders of her dark blazer. She was in her late 50s, short, severe, and composed in a way that made everyone else in the room straighten without being told. She carried one leather folder. No entourage. No theatrics. Agent Quinn rose from the conference table. Deputy Attorney General Baines. Rachel nodded once. Mara. Her eyes moved to Evelyn. There was no smile, no softness, no false warmth. Miss Harper. Evelyn stood. Ma'am. Rachel looked at the legal pads. The whiteboard, the names, the medication override, counts the printed still from Tessa's video showing Kessler's hand gripping Evelyn's arm. Then she looked back at Evelyn. You started writing at what time? About 2 this morning. You stopped. Number. Rachel took the chair across from her. Good, memory bleeds out if you wait too long. Evelyn sat. Rachel opened the leather folder and slid a clean sheet of paper onto the table. I read your statement. I read Nurse Monroe's statement. I reviewed the preliminary record seizure and the transfer documentation for Walter Briggs. I also reviewed your employment file. Tessa, seated near the wall with a paper cup of tea, looked up nervously. Rachel continued. Cedar Ridge is going to argue you have a pattern of insubordination. I know. They are going to say you resent physicians. I don't. They are going to say you acted outside your role. I acted inside my oath. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. Do not say that on the stand unless asked. Evelyn blinked. Rachel leaned back. It is a good line. Too good. Jurors like truth, but they do not like feeling handled. Your strength is not rhetoric, it is precision. Evelyn nodded once. Rachel tapped the paper. This case is not about whether you are brave. Brave people can be wrong. This case is about whether Cedar Ridge had a pattern of patient harm, whether administrators and physicians knew about it, whether they hid it, whether they retaliated against those who reported it, and whether their conduct crossed from bad medicine into criminal negligence and obstruction. She looked around the room. We proved that with records, with metadata, with witnesses, with timelines, with internal emails, with the bodies they tried to turn into paperwork. Tessa lowered her eyes. Rachel's voice did not soften, but it steadied. No one in this room gets to carry all of them alone. That is how institutions like Cedar Ridge survive. They make every decent person feel personally responsible for a failure designed by many hands. Evelyn looked at the names on the whiteboard. Rachel turned back to her. You are important, Ms. Harper. But you are not the whole case. Remember that when their attorneys try to make you believe everything depends on whether they can make you angry. I understand. No, Rachel said. You have heard it. You will understand it when Roland Tate asks you why you stayed 6 years in a hospital you now claim was dangerous. The room went quiet. Evelyn felt the question enter her like cold water. Rachel watched her. Answer me. Evelyn folded her hands. Because the town needed the hospital. Because good staff still worked there. Because I thought documentation would force change. Because leaving felt like abandoning the patients who had nowhere else to go. Rachel waited. And because I was afraid, Evelyn said. Rachel nodded. That answer works because it is true. Evelyn held her gaze. What happens now? Rachel closed the folder. Now we build a case that survives money. 3 months passed before the first indictment. They did not pass quietly. Cedar Ridge stayed open under emergency federal oversight, but it no longer felt like the same hospital. Federal monitors occupied administration offices. The electronic record system was frozen, mirrored, audited, and rebuilt in sections. Patient transfers increased. Outside physicians rotated in from St. Anselm. Nurses, who had once spoken in whispers, began writing formal reports with their names attached. Some staff resigned. Some called Evelyn a traitor. Some sent messages at midnight that said only, "I'm sorry." Evelyn did not answer most of them. She moved into a furnished apartment outside Denver under federal witness protection advisement, though nobody used that phrase around her unless necessary. A security detail watched her building. Reporters learned the street and waited near the coffee shop until Agent Quinn had them moved back. Tessa stayed with her sister in Boulder for a while, then accepted a position at St. Anselm. She testified before the grand jury in a navy dress that still had the tag tucked into the collar until Evelyn fixed it in the courthouse bathroom. Luke Sutter kept working ambulance shifts, but now every time he rolled past Cedar Ridge he looked at the building as if it were a wrecked vehicle, not yet cleared from the road. Walter Briggs survived. He spent 19 days at St. Anselm and another month in cardiac rehabilitation. June sent Evelyn updates every Sunday. At first, they were clinical, as if June was afraid emotion might be too heavy for a woman already carrying a federal case. Walter walked 30 feet today. Walter ate half a turkey sandwich. Walter cursed at physical therapy, which seems like progress. Then one message came with a photo. Walter, standing between parallel bars, thin but upright, smiling, like a man who had stolen something back from death. Evelyn saved it. She did not show anyone. The medication review widened. The number 47 became 62, then 79. Not every override was criminal. Not every bad outcome could be traced cleanly to a decision. Medicine was complicated. Bodies were complicated. Prosecutors knew juries distrusted cases that pretended otherwise. But certain records spoke with a terrible clarity. Walter Briggs, contraindication warning. Jennifer Lyle's second arrival time stamped by triage and never assigned a physician reassessment. Michael Grant's abnormal lactate result marked reviewed 3 hours after discharge, though metadata showed the note was entered the next morning. Arnold Pike's oxygen saturation documented by a respiratory therapist, then overwritten in a physician note to appear less severe. The complaint files from Kessler's cabinet matched settlement payments approved by Meredith Crane. Emails tied the pattern together. Rachel Baines read one aloud during a strategy meeting, her voice flat. "We need to keep these complaints internal. State review triggers are avoidable if families are handled quickly." The sender was Meredith. The reply came from Dr. Calvin Roth. "Agreed. Nurses need to stop charting speculative concerns." Another from Kessler. "Harper is becoming a liability. Remove her from cardiac and neuro assignments if possible." Evelyn stared at the printed page for a long time. Agent Quinn sat beside her. "You okay?" Evelyn placed the email down carefully. "I thought I was paranoid." Quinn shook her head. "No, you were being studied." The indictment came on a Thursday morning under a flat, gray sky. United States versus Adrian Kessler, Calvin Roth, Elaine Pierce, and Meredith Crane. Charges included conspiracy to obstruct health care, oversight, health care fraud connected to federal reimbursements, falsification and concealment of patient safety records, retaliation against whistleblowers, and criminally negligent patient harm in selected cases where causation could be argued with evidence. The press conference was brief. Rachel Baines stood at the podium. Daniel Harper was not present. His absence spoke louder than any statement. Rachel said, "This case is not an indictment of rural medicine. It is an indictment of people who hid danger from patients' regulators and their own staff." Reporters shouted questions about the Attorney General's mother. Rachel looked over the room. "The Attorney General is recused. The evidence is not." The trial began 7 months later. By then, Redstone had changed shape around the case. Yard signs appeared on both sides. Support Cedar Ridge staff. Justice for patients. Stop federal overreach. Protect whistleblowers. At the courthouse, families of former patients stood in the cold before sunrise. Some held photographs. Some held nothing. Grief did not always need props. Evelyn arrived through a side entrance with Agent Quinn. She wore a dark gray suit borrowed from a retired Army friend who said it had already survived 3 depositions and 1 divorce hearing. Her hair was pinned back. No medals, no service ribbons, no symbols of anything except the fact that she had come to speak under oath. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Daniel waited. He wore a plain overcoat and no visible badge of office. 2 security agents stood far enough back to pretend this was a private moment. Evelyn stopped. "You should not be here." He smiled faintly. "I am not here as the Attorney General. That sentence has never worked for anyone. I am here as your son." From the public gallery, silent, annoyingly well-behaved. She looked at his tired face. "You look thin. I run the Department of Justice. You still need lunch." His smile faded. "How are you?" Evelyn looked toward the courtroom doors. "Useful." He nodded, but his eyes were wet. "That is not the same as okay. Number." He hugged her carefully as if she might break and as if he knew she would hate being treated that way. When he stepped back, he fixed the collar of her jacket. "You taught me not to lie," he said. "So don't perform. Don't fight every question. Just tell the truth and let them stand next to it." Evelyn touched his hand. "You sound like a lawyer." "I'm sorry." "You should be." Agent Quinn approached. "It's time." Inside the courtroom carried the particular cold of public judgment. Wood benches. Fluorescent light. The seal of the United States above the judge's bench. Jurors filing in with notebooks and guarded faces. The defendants sat at one table. Adrian Kessler looked smaller without the hospital around him. Still polished, still silver-haired, but the white coat was gone, and with it some invisible armor. Calvin Roth stared straight ahead. Elaine Pierce kept her hands folded so tightly her knuckles blanched. Meredith Crane whispered to her attorney, her face pale beneath careful makeup. Roland Tate headed the defense team. He turned once as Evelyn entered. His eyes found the bruise that had long since faded from her arm, though photographs of it were now part of the evidence. He smiled politely. Evelyn looked through him. Opening statements began after jury instructions. Roland Tate stood first for the defense. He moved like a man who understood rooms, voice-controlled hands, open expression, sorrowful. "Medicine is not perfect," he began. "Emergency rooms are places of pressure, uncertainty, and impossible decisions. The government wants to take difficult medical judgments and turn them into crimes. Why? Because one nurse disagreed with doctors. Because that nurse had a powerful son. Because a rural hospital became an easy target in a political moment." He walked slowly before the jury box. "You will hear tragic stories. You will hear painful outcomes. But bad outcomes are not proof of criminal conduct. You will hear from nurses who disagreed with physicians. Disagreement is not evidence. You will hear statistics removed from context. Numbers are not guilt. At the end of this trial, we will ask you to remember that medicine requires judgment, and judgment cannot be prosecuted simply because someone else later wanted a different answer." He sat. Rachel Baines rose. She carried no notes to the podium. For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked at the jury. Walter Briggs came to Cedar Ridge with chest pain, jaw pain, sweating shortness of breath, and an irregular pulse. He had been there before. More than once. He was sent home without basic cardiac testing. On the day he nearly died, a nurse asked for an EKG. Not surgery, not a miracle. An EKG. Kessler stared down at the table. Rachel continued, "This case is not about punishing doctors for being imperfect. It is about powerful people being warned again and again that patients were being harmed and choosing to hide the warnings instead of fixing the danger." She turned slightly toward the evidence table. "You will see emails. You will see altered records. You will see complaint files locked away from regulators. You will see settlement agreements used not to heal families but to silence them. You will hear from patients, from nurses, from experts, and from the data itself." Her voice sharpened. "The defense will tell you this is about one nurse. It is not. Evelyn Harper did not create Cedar Ridge's records. She did not write the defendant's emails. She did not override medication warnings. She did not hide complaints in a locked cabinet. She did not make families sign away their voices. Rachel looked back at the jury. The evidence is going to show you a system, and then it is going to show you who protected it. The government called Walter Briggs on the third day. He entered slowly with a cane, June at his side until the clerk asked her to sit. The courtroom changed when people saw him. Until then, Walter had been a name in opening statements, a chart, a near-death event in legal language. Now he was a man in a tan jacket who had trouble lowering himself into the witness chair without wincing. Rachel approached gently. "Mr. Briggs, do you remember going to Cedar Ridge on February 3rd? Walter adjusted the microphone. "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you go?" "My chest felt wrong." "Wrong how?" He looked at the jury, not at Kessler. "Pressure. Like somebody set a toolbox on me. It moved up into my jaw and shoulder. I was sweating. My wife said I looked gray." "Had you been to Cedar Ridge before for similar symptoms?" "Yes." "How many times?" 3. "Maybe 4 if you count the time June made me go and I left before being seen because I felt foolish." June wiped her eyes in the gallery. Rachel asked, "What were you told?" "That it was reflux." "Then anxiety." "Dr. Kessler said stress does strange things to men my age." "Did that make you feel reassured?" Walter breathed through his nose. "No, it made me feel stupid." A juror looked down at her notebook. Rachel softened her voice. "What do you remember about Evelyn Harper?" Walter turned his head. Evelyn sat behind the prosecution table, hands folded in her lap. She looked at me like she believed me. No one moved. Walter continued. "That sounds small." It wasn't. Everyone else was trying to make my wife and me calm down. Evelyn was trying to figure out why my body was yelling. Rachel asked, "Did you consent to transfer?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because she told me she thought my heart was in danger. And because I believed her before I believed the man telling me to drink pink medicine and relax." On cross-examination, Tate approached with sympathy polished into every line of his face. "Mr. Briggs, you were frightened that morning." "Yes." "You are not medically trained." "Number." "You relied on Ms. Harper's statements." "I relied on the fact that I could not breathe." Tate paused. A few jurors looked up. He tried again. "You understand that anxiety can mimic cardiac symptoms." Walter leaned toward the microphone. "I understand that a heart attack can mimic anxiety when the doctor wants it to." Rachel objected. The judge sustained, but the jury had heard it. Jennifer Lyle's husband testified next week. His name was Thomas Lyle, a history teacher with a voice so calm it made the courtroom ache. He described Jennifer waking him at 2 a.m, one hand over her right eye, saying the pain felt like lightning trapped in her skull. He described Cedar Ridge sending her home with migraine medication. He described returning 3 hours later because she could no longer stand. He looked at Elaine Pierce when he said the next part. "They told us to go home and let the medication work." Rachel asked, "Did a physician reassess her?" Number. "What happened after you went home?" Thomas swallowed. "Our daughter found her on the bathroom floor." The courtroom stayed silent for several seconds after that. Tate did not cross him harshly. He was too smart for that. He asked about Jennifer's medical history, about migraines, about uncertainty. Thomas answered every question as if grading an exam from a student who had chosen cruelty over accuracy. Then came the experts. A cardiologist explained Walter's symptoms in plain language. An emergency medicine physician testified that the standard of care required an EKG and cardiac enzymes. A pharmacologist walked the jury through the verapamil warning and the danger of overriding a high-severity contraindication in a patient with documented severe aortic stenosis. The defense objected often. The judge allowed most of it. The electronic medical records specialist became one of the most damaging witnesses because he did not sound emotional at all. He showed the jury how entries were time-stamped, how edits were logged, how review times could be reconstructed even when someone tried to make the chart look cleaner later. On a large screen, the jury saw Michael Grant's lab result. Critical lactate level. Time resulted 14:08. Physician review note entered 1941. Chart display time altered to imply review before discharge. The expert pointed with a laser. This is not an automatic correction. This is a manual entry. Rachel asked. Can you tell which user made the entry? Yes? Who? Dr. Calvin Roth. Roth closed his eyes. By the time Molly Sanchez took the stand, the courtroom had already absorbed the shape of Cedar Ridge. But Molly gave it sound. She described the schedule changes after reports. The meetings where Meredith Crane told nurses to be solution-oriented and avoid defensive charting. The way Kessler mocked staff who requested tests. The way Pierce kept a list of nurses she considered emotionally reactive. The way Roth signed discharge paperwork before lab results returned because the waiting room was full and the board looked bad. Rachel asked, "Why did you stay?" Molly cried then, but quietly. "Because my husband had cancer. Because we needed insurance. Because I told myself I could do more good inside than outside. Because I thought if I left, another nurse would just have to stand where I stood." Evelyn looked down. She did not need to see the jury to know the answer had landed. Tessa testified after lunch. She wore navy again, the color of the scrubs she had lost. She looked terrified walking to the witness stand, but when Rachel asked her to identify the video, her voice steadied. "Yes," Tessa said. "I recorded Dr. Kessler grabbing Evelyn Harper." The video played in court. No one breathed normally while it ran. Kessler's voice filled the room. "You're finished, Harper." His hand on Evelyn's arm. Tessa's own shaking voice. "I'm recording this. Let her go." The prosecution paused the video on Kessler's fingers pressing into Evelyn's skin. Rachel asked, "Why did you record?" Tessa looked at the jury. "Because I knew if I only told people what happened, they would make it smaller." That sentence stayed in the room long after the video ended. Then Evelyn took the stand. The courtroom felt different when she walked forward. Not louder, not quieter, just narrower, as if the walls had leaned in. She raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth. "Saturday." Rachel approached. "Please state your name." "Evelyn Marie Harper." "Occupation." "Registered nurse." "Former emergency department nurse at Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center." "Former United States Army combat medic." Rachel moved carefully through the foundation. Evelyn's training. Her years in emergency medicine. Her role at Cedar Ridge. Her prior reports. Her documentation habits. Then Walter. Evelyn described the morning without ornament. The triage symptoms. The monitor readings. The prior visits. Kessler's refusal. Walter's deterioration. The transfer. The call confirming myocardial infarction. Rachel asked, "Did you diagnose Walter Briggs?" "Number." "What did you do?" "I identified signs of possible cardiac compromise and asked the physician to reassess." "Why?" "Because his presentation was dangerous." "Did Dr. Kessler reassess him?" "Number." "Why did you arrange transfer?" Evelyn looked at Walter in the gallery. "Because waiting for permission from a doctor who refused to look was going to kill him." Tate objected. The judge sustained part of it and instructed the jury to consider only facts, not speculation. Rachel nodded. "Ms. Harper, based on what you observed, what did you believe was necessary?" "Immediate cardiac evaluation." "Did Mr. Briggs consent?" "Yes." "Did you document that consent?" "Yes." "Did you report concerns internally before that day?" "Yes." "How many times?" "I personally submitted more than 30 safety concerns over 6 years. Some formal, some through nursing chain, some directly to risk management." "What happened?" "Usually nothing visible. Sometimes retaliation." "What kind of retaliation?" "Schedule changes. Assignment changes. Negative evaluations. Warnings about tone. Being called disruptive." Rachel let the words sit. Then she asked, "Were you trying to harm Cedar Ridge?" "Number." "Were you trying to punish Dr. Kessler?" "Number." Were you trying to involve your son? Number. Why did you call the secure oversight line? Evelyn took a breath. Because the internal system had failed, and a patient almost died in front of us because of it. Rachel returned to her table. No further questions. Roland Tate stood. He buttoned his jacket as he approached. His face held polite regret. Ms. Harper, you are not a physician. Number. You did not attend medical school. Number. You cannot prescribe medications. Number. You cannot independently order cardiac enzymes. Number. You cannot independently admit or transfer a patient under Cedar Ridge policy without physician authorization. Evelyn paused. I cannot force a hospital to keep a patient who requests transfer. Tate smiled. We will get to your interpretation of policy. Please answer yes or no when possible. I will answer accurately. A small shift moved through the jury. Tate's smile thinned. You have a long history of conflict with physicians, correct? Number. He lifted a document. Your personnel file contains 5 disciplinary notices. Yes. For insubordination. That is the word Cedar Ridge used. For refusing to follow physician direction. For reporting unsafe physician direction. Ms. Harper, you seem to believe your interpretation of events is always the correct one. Number. No, I believe records matter because memory becomes convenient under pressure. Tate turned slightly toward the jury. You stayed at Cedar Ridge for 6 years. Yes. A hospital you now describe as systemically dangerous. Yes. Why? Evelyn felt Rachel's preparation settle around her like armor, but the answer still hurt. Because the town needed an emergency room. Because good people worked there. Because I thought reporting would help. Because I was afraid of losing my career. Because leaving would not have protected the next patient. Tate tilted his head. But staying protected them. No, Evelyn said, not enough. The honesty stopped him for half a beat. He recovered. You transferred Walter Briggs after Dr. Kessler refused to authorize transfer. Yes. You made a decision against a physician's judgment. I acted after the patient consented and after his condition worsened. You believed you knew better. I believed he needed an EKG. Tate's voice sharpened. Again, Ms. Harper, you believed you knew better than the doctor. Evelyn looked at him. I believed the patient's body was giving better information than the doctor's pride. Rachel objected. The judge warned Evelyn to answer the question. Tate stepped closer. Your son is the Attorney General of the United States. Yes. You knew that invoking federal channels could create pressure on Cedar Ridge. I knew reporting patient harm could create an investigation. You knew your son's position would make that investigation more serious. Number. I knew it would make my life harder. Tate paced once. Ms. Harper, is it possible that after years of frustration you saw in Walter Briggs a chance to prove yourself right? Evelyn sat still. Number. Is it possible you wanted Dr. Kessler humiliated? Number. Is it possible your military background makes you more comfortable breaking rules than civilian medical professionals? The room shifted. Rachel stood. Objection. Sustained, the judge said. Tate raised his hand slightly. I'll rephrase. You served in combat medicine. Yes. In combat, you made rapid decisions under pressure. Yes. Sometimes without physician supervision. Yes. So, when you returned to civilian medicine, did you struggle with accepting limits on your role? Evelyn looked at the jury. In combat, the limit was whether the patient lived long enough to reach a surgeon. In civilian medicine, the limit should never be a doctor refusing to order a basic test because a nurse suggested it. The judge looked at Tate. Move on, counsel. Tate did, but his rhythm had changed. He tried the military records next. A patient she lost overseas. A field decision questioned in a review and later cleared. He implied trauma. He implied arrogance. He implied Evelyn had spent her life chasing redemption through other people's emergencies. Evelyn answered each question with as few words as possible. Yes. Number. I do not recall it that way. That is not what the report found. Read the next sentence. That last answer hurt him. Tate had quoted from an Army after action review about a chaotic evacuation where 2 casualties died. Evelyn asked him to read the next sentence. He resisted. Rachel requested the full document be displayed. The next sentence stated that Sergeant Harper's actions under fire saved at least 6 lives and prevented further loss of personnel. Tate moved on. By the time Evelyn stepped down, her shirt clung to her back beneath the suit jacket. Her face looked calm. Her hands did not. In the hallway during recess, Daniel waited near a window. He did not touch her at first. He only said, "You held." Evelyn leaned one shoulder against the wall. "I wanted to break his nose." "I know. You would have objected. As a son or as a lawyer?" "Both. As a lawyer, yes. As a son, I would have asked for a recess first." She laughed, then surprising herself. It came out tired and cracked but real. The defense called Kessler 2 days later. Everyone knew it was a risk. Men like Kessler often mistook silence for defeat. He needed the jury to hear his voice, to feel his certainty, to see him as the physician in command. At first he performed well. He described rural emergency pressure, overcrowding, limited resources, patients with vague symptoms, the danger of unnecessary transfers, the importance of physician judgment. He called Evelyn skilled but rigid. He called her unable to respect clinical hierarchy. Tate guided him carefully. Then Rachel stood for cross-examination. She carried a single binder. Dr. Kessler. Walter Briggs presented with chest pressure, jaw pain, shoulder pain, sweating, irregular pulse, and shortness of breath. In context, yes. Those can be cardiac symptoms. They can be. You did not order an EKG. Number. Why? I made a clinical judgment. You did not order troponins. Number. Why? Same answer. You diagnosed reflux and anxiety. Yes. 3 times over 5 weeks. Kessler shifted. I would need to review the chart. Rachel opened the binder. Let's review it. One by one, the prior visits appeared on screen. Similar symptoms. Similar diagnosis. No cardiac workup. Rachel asked. At any point, did you consider that a 64-year-old man with recurrent chest pressure and radiation might need cardiac evaluation? Kessler said he did not present classically. Rachel clicked to the triage note. Chest pressure radiating to jaw. Diaphoresis. Shortness of breath. She looked at him. What would have made it classic enough? Kessler's jaw tightened. Rachel turned to the medication issue. You prescribed verapamil 3 days before Mr. Briggs' myocardial infarction. Yes. The electronic medical record generated a severe contraindication warning due to documented aortic stenosis. Warnings are frequent. You overrode it. Yes. Reason entered physician aware. Continue. Yes. What were you aware of? Kessler looked at the screen. Rachel waited. What were you aware of, doctor? That the warning existed. Were you aware of his documented severe aortic stenosis? I would have been. That is not what I asked. Kessler's face flushed. I do not specifically recall. Rachel nodded slightly. Then she displayed other overrides. 7, 13, 21. Each one a warning. Each one dismissed. Some patients survived. Some returned worse. Some died. Rachel did not raise her voice. That made it worse. Dr. Kessler, is it your testimony that all of these were sound clinical judgments? In emergency medicine, decisions are complicated. Is clicking past a warning without reading the chart complicated? Tate objected. The judge allowed the question. Kessler did not answer. Rachel stepped closer. Doctor, you described Ms. Harper as disruptive. Was she disruptive because she was wrong, or because she created a written record when you did not want one? Kessler looked toward the jury. I reject that characterization. Rachel picked up an email. You wrote, Harper is becoming a liability. Remove her from cardiac and neuro assignments if possible. What liability did she create? Kessler swallowed. She was undermining physician confidence. In whom? The silence stretched. Rachel led it. Then she sat down. No further questions. Meredith Crane did not testify. Neither did Roth. Pierce wanted to, according to hallway rumors, but her attorneys stopped her after Kessler's collapse on cross-examination. Closing arguments came on a Friday. Tate returned to uncertainty. He told jurors the government had built a story out of tragedy. He said the records showed pressure, not criminality. He said rural doctors were being judged by hindsight. He said Evelyn Harper was sincere, but sincerity did not make her right. Rachel stood last. She placed both hands on the podium. The defense wants you to believe this case is about hindsight. It is not. Hindsight is when you learn something later that no one could have known before. Cedar Ridge knew before. Nurses told them. Families told them. Lab values told them. Medication warnings told them. Deaths told them. She turned to the evidence screen. Emails appeared. Complaint logs. Override reports. Tessa's video still. Walter's EKG from St. Anselm. Rachel faced the jury again. They were not asked to be perfect. They were asked to look. They refused. They were asked to report. They hid. They were asked to protect patients. They protected themselves. Her voice lowered. Criminal conduct does not always enter a room wearing a mask. Sometimes it wears a white coat. Sometimes it carries a clipboard. Sometimes it speaks in policies and settlement language and tells frightened people they are confused. No one moved. This case is not about one mistake. It is about a choice repeated until it became a system. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Evelyn spent most of that time in a small witness room with Tessa Luke, June Walter Agent Quinn, and a vending machine that stole $2 from Daniel Harper before refusing to give him pretzels. Walter laughed so hard he had to sit down. "You run the Justice Department and lost to a snack machine." Daniel stared at the glass. "I am considering a federal inquiry." Evelyn shook her head. "That machine has more due process than most people." For those few minutes the room breathed. Then the marshal knocked. Verdict. The courtroom filled fast. Evelyn sat behind the prosecution table. Daniel sat in the back row, hands clasped. June held Walter's arm. Thomas Lyle held a photograph of Jennifer in his lap face down. The jury entered. No one looked at the defendants. The foreperson stood. On conspiracy to obstruct healthcare oversight. Guilty. Meredith Crane covered her mouth. On healthcare fraud. Guilty. On falsification and concealment of safety records. Guilty. On retaliation against whistleblowers. Guilty. On selected counts of criminally negligent patient harm. Kessler. Guilty. Roth. Guilty. Pierce. Guilty. The words did not feel like triumph. They felt like impact after a long fall. Behind Evelyn, someone began to cry. Not loudly. Just one broken sound that became many. Thomas Lyle lowered his head over Jennifer's photograph. Walter closed his eyes. Tessa gripped Evelyn's hand so hard it hurt. Kessler sat frozen. For the first time, his face had no argument left in it. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Families spoke. Some forgave no one. Some asked the court to remember the living as well as the dead. Thomas Lyle spoke of his daughters learning to braid each other's hair because their mother was gone. Walter spoke briefly, his voice still rough. "I am not here because I want revenge. I am here because I want the next man with chest pain to be treated like a patient, not an inconvenience." Evelyn did not plan to speak, but Rachel asked if she wanted to. She stood at the podium and looked at the judge. "I do not know how to measure harm like this. I know how to count pulse pressure respirations. I know how to pack a wound. I know how to call time of death when there is nothing left to do. But I do not know how to measure all the moments stolen after a preventable death." Birthdays. Breakfasts, arguments. Ordinary mornings. She glanced toward the defendants. "I stayed silent too long. I have to live with that. But the people who built that silence should have to live with judgment." She sat down. The judge imposed sentence in a courtroom so quiet that paper sounded loud. Adrian Kessler received 8 years in federal prison and permanent revocation of his medical license. Calvin Roth received 5 years. Elaine Pierce received 6. Meredith Crane received 4 for obstruction, conspiracy, and concealment. Cedar Ridge Regional Medical Center was placed under federal receivership, fined heavily, and stripped of independent emergency operating authority until rebuilt under outside supervision. St. Anselm opened a temporary emergency unit in Redstone within the month, staffed by rotating physicians, local nurses who passed review, and federal monitors who did not smile at vague answers. The town did not heal all at once. No town does. Some people blamed Evelyn for the shame. Others thanked her in grocery aisles and then looked away because gratitude tied to death is hard to hold in public. Former Cedar Ridge employees rebuilt careers slowly. Tessa flourished at St. Anselm, though she still froze sometimes when a doctor raised his voice. Luke kept a copy of the verdict folded behind his ambulance visor. Walter kept walking. 1 year after the morning he almost died, Evelyn visited him at cardiac rehab. He was on a treadmill when she arrived, moving slowly but stubbornly, one hand on the rail, and June standing nearby with the fierce attention of a woman who had once almost lost him to another man's arrogance. Walter saw Evelyn and grinned. "Don't tell me my form is bad." Evelyn watched the monitor. "Your form is terrible. Your rhythm is acceptable." June laughed. Walter tapped the treadmill controls and slowed to a stop. "You still bossing sick people around? Only the ones trying to die without permission." He stepped off carefully. June handed him a towel. Walter looked at Evelyn for a long moment. "You look tired." "I am." "Good. Means you're alive." Evelyn smiled. "That's your medical opinion. My wife says I'm not allowed to have those anymore." June nodded. "Correct." They sat near the rehab center windows while snow fell outside, softer than it had that morning. Walter talked about his grandchildren. June talked about selling the house with too many stairs. Evelyn listened. It was easier now to listen to the living. When she left, Daniel was waiting in the parking lot beside her car. No cameras. No agents close enough to hear. Just her son, in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, breath white in the cold. "You followed me?" she asked. "I arrived independently at the same location." "You are a terrible liar." "That is why I went into law enforcement." She shook her head, but she walked into his hug. For a long time, neither of them said anything. Finally, Daniel asked, "Are you okay?" Evelyn looked back through the window. Walter was laughing at something June said. Tessa had come by after her shift and was helping an older man adjust his walker. Life moved in small, stubborn acts. "No," Evelyn said. Daniel waited. She breathed in the cold mountain air. "But I am not frozen anymore." His arms tightened around her. "That is a start." Months later, Evelyn stood in a training auditorium at St. Anselm in front of nurses, medics, residents, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, and hospital administrators who had come because attendance was mandatory. Curiosity was human, and fear still traveled faster than policy. She wore no suit this time. No uniform. Just dark slacks, a blue sweater, and a scar near her collarbone visible where the fabric shifted. The room quieted when she reached the microphone. She looked at the faces in front of her. Young nurses with new badges. Old nurses with tired eyes. Residents pretending not to be nervous. Administrators holding pens above notebooks. Evelyn opened the folder in front of her, then closed it again. In combat medicine, she said you learn the difference between noise and signal. Noise is screaming. Dust, rotor blades, gunfire. Orders coming from people who cannot see what you see. Signal is the thing underneath, a change in breathing, a pulse getting weaker, a soldier who stops complaining because he no longer has the strength. No one moved. Hospitals have noise too. Metrics, policies, hierarchy, fear of lawsuits, fear of losing jobs, fear of being called difficult. Somewhere underneath there is still a patient trying to be heard. She looked down at her hands. I missed signals. I ignored some because someone above me said not to worry. I wrote reports and thought writing was enough. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was not. Her voice steadied. I am not here to tell you to be reckless. Recklessness gets people killed. I am here to tell you that obedience can do the same when it becomes more important than assessment. In the third row, Tessa sat with her arms folded, eyes bright. Evelyn continued. If you see danger, name it clearly. Document facts, not fury. Use the chain of command. If the chain breaks, do not pretend it is still holding. Keep the patient at the center because the system will try to make itself the patient. It will ask you to protect its reputation, its revenue, its pride. She paused. Do not confuse those things with a life. The auditorium stayed silent after she finished. Not the silence of discomfort. The silence of people checking something inside themselves. Evelyn stepped away from the microphone. No applause came at first. Then Walter Briggs, seated near the aisle with June beside him, stood slowly with his cane. He clapped once. Then again. The room rose around him. Evelyn looked at Tessa, who was crying openly now and not ashamed of it. Outside the auditorium, snow had begun to fall over Denver. Evelyn walked into the hallway and stopped near a window. Below, an ambulance backed into the bay. A medic jumped out, one hand on the stretcher, the other signaling to the receiving team. The doors opened. The patient disappeared inside. A nurse met them at the threshold with gloved hands and focused eyes. Evelyn watched until the doors closed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Proud of you. Dinner Sunday. I'm not burning toast this time. Evelyn typed back. That sounds like evidence tampering. His reply came fast. Objection. She smiled, slipped the phone into her pocket, and turned away from the window. Behind her, the ambulance bay doors opened again. Another patient. Another warning. Another chance for someone to listen before it was too late. Evelyn walked toward the sound.